As we grow older, the curiosity we once ignored becomes the key to understanding who we really are. It happens quietly. In our younger years, many of us are focused on fitting in, chasing trends, or building the life we think we're supposed to have. The older we get, the more we seek the roots beneath our branches. We begin asking questions we never thought to ask, such as, why do we celebrate this holiday? Why do we cook this dish a certain way? Or why are certain customs passed down even though they don't seem to make sense at first? That journey back isn't just about tradition, it's about meaning. Because every ritual, every story, every symbol has a purpose, an origin rooted in survival, community, love, or even resistance. The way our ancestors gathered, prayed, dressed, greeted, celebrated, or mourned wasn't random. It was their way of navigating life, passing wisdom, and leaving behind a blueprint for us. So why does this matter today? In a world where cultures blend, shift, and sometimes fade, reconnecting with our heritage gives us a sense of belonging and identity. It anchors us when life feels uncertain. It is a reminder of the sacrifices that were made for our existence. It helps us appreciate the beauty and depth of our roots, not just the surface details. Learning the culture can give us pride in who we are and where we come from, clarity about our family values and traditions, respect for our ancestors' resilience and creativity, and understanding of how our past influences the choice we make today. And the impact doesn't stop from us. The knowledge we gain becomes the knowledge we pass on to our children, to our community, to friends who want to learn and celebrate with us. When we understand our culture, we're not just preserving the past, we're shaping the future. We become a bridge between generations. We honor the legacy of those before us while making space for evolution and inclusion. If you were just like me, where growing up, I did not like or took the time to learn to understand the Hmong culture, to now being a lot older and realizing that the language, customs, and traditions, they were always just there in the background, like family photos you walk past but never really stopped to study. I knew I was Hmong, but I didn't know what that meant. Then life happened. I went through some personal challenges and experiences, which, if you have been a long-time listener from the beginning to now, you already know what those experiences were. There were moments where I felt lost, disconnected, like I didn't really fully belong anywhere. And for the first time, I found myself wanting to understand where I came from, to learning more about the Hmong culture. I started asking questions. Why do we celebrate certain ceremonies? What do our symbols and clothing mean? Why are our oral traditions and clan systems so important? The more I learned and researched, the more I realized how much strength, resilience, and beauty existed within the Hmong culture. Our history of survival, our music, our embroidery, our storytelling, even the values that shaped the way our parents and grandparents lived. You guys, I'm still learning, I'm still asking questions, I'm still discovering, and although I don't fully understand certain things about the culture, I know that I cannot hate, blame, or see the negativity of it because I'd rather understand than to make assumptions just because of my past experience. I know a lot of us younger generation do not like what the Hmong culture stand for or the custom ways of doing life, such as weddings, divorcings, funerals, and such forth. However, let's at least take the time to seek the truth and knowledge of the culture. And like I always say, we can always agree to disagree. However, we shouldn't hate or be bitter just because the culture may have failed us in certain points in our life. So on this episode, I've invited a good friend of mine named Han, who will be my guest on my podcast, where we will be having conversations about his personal experiences of rediscovering his Hmong roots through deep research and personal exploration. From him studying traditional customs, language, and history to connecting with elders and cultural leaders, his growing knowledge sparked a deeper appreciation for the Hmong culture. And with this understanding, he has taken steps to give back, whether through cultural education or community advocacy. His story highlights how reconnecting with culture and heritage can inspire meaningful change and strengthen the Hmong community as a whole. So, if you are searching to find answers to your questions pertaining to the Hmong culture and you don't know where to start, I highly recommend you to take a listen to this episode because it will give you so much insightful information and knowledge of the culture and how you can take the first step to finding those answers. So, if you are interested in learning more about this, keep on listening because you don't want to miss this episode. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Yours Truly. It is I, your one and only host, Druelee, of course. As I have stated in my introduction, this episode will be a very special one because I have a special guest. Now, before I actually begin this episode, for those who are interested in coming into my podcast and doing an episode, you guys are more than welcome to do that. Let's connect. Let's set up a date and time. That way we can figure out how we can create an episode on whatever topic you want to talk about. Now, I get that my podcast can be a little bit too much, a little bit too dark, too taboo for certain people. That is fine. My podcast is a safe place for you to express your feelings, express your emotion, just talk about the things that people don't normally talk about. So if you're interested in being a part of my guests, I welcome you to be part of it. And like I say, I know a lot of people, they don't feel comfortable being part of something that can be put out into the public. I only mean well. And so if you're not comfortable, that's totally fine. But I love it when people reach out to me and they're interested in being a part of my podcast where we could just have conversations, like real honest conversation about life or your personal life. You never know if certain people are going through the same thing as you are. By you doing an episode talking about your life experience, what you have learned, it could change someone and it could influence them to live a better life. And so on this episode, I have a very good friend of mine named Han who will be discussing and telling us about his experience of why he decided to learn more about the Hmong culture. And for those who have been listening to me from the beginning, you guys know that I am Hmong. I didn't grow up in a traditional Hmong family. I grew up in you could say like a Hmong Christian family type of vibe, okay? And so with his knowledge and his experience, I do believe that it will influence or it will bring out tons of information for those who are wanting to learn more about the culture itself. Because for me, when I'm getting older, I do want to learn more about the culture. I want to understand it. And so without being said, let me go ahead and start our conversation. And I hope that you guys enjoy this. Han, thank you so much for being a part of my podcast and sharing your personal life experiences with me and along with my listeners. Before we actually dive into you telling us your experience of rediscovering the Hmong culture, could you introduce yourself to us and share a bit about your background?
My name is Han, short for HanXueyi. My Hmong name is Li Ming. I am a Vang. My connection to the Hmong culture starts out with the family just being connected to the Hmong roots, especially in the early years of my family. My dad used to be a big involvement with the General Vang Pao era in the 90s. Growing up, we would have a lot of visitations from him. Moving forward, I had my spiritual journey started at 2009, and it prompted me to dive deeper into the Hmong culture and its religion. In 2017, I had the interest and started taking courses on the Hmong culture, not particularly to practice, but just to have a better understanding. And as you understand the culture more, it prompts you to start practicing certain things or have certain beliefs or point of views of why the Hmong culture it is the way it is today.
What would you say was the major personal experience or event in your life that started your interest in learning more about the Hmong culture?
One of the major events that started my decision to get into the Hmong culture is my spiritual journey that I had back in 2009. Moving forward, I got really involved in the Hmong community based on what we call a generation these days. I believe, like, any other generations, there's time and opportunity to present yourself. And I believe that made a platform for me to start pursuing the Hmong culture and the understanding of why we do these things.
So, has your research that you've done led you to having a new perspective or insight about the culture that you haven't considered before?
Yes, I believe with the answers that I've found or just the knowledge that I'm obtained, a lot of the Hmong culture, people misunderstand just because they don't really dive deep into the culture itself. One of the culture teaches me is how to have a balanced life between what is Hmong community versus Hmong traditions and culture. It does reflect on some of the misinformation you see in today's community about the Hmong culture, especially with women having not a lot of authority or power. Diving deep into the culture, it reflects on at one point, woman was this core structure of the culture. So it taught me a lot of things, how to respect women, how to treat women, how to become a better, per se, man in the Hmong culture versus what you see today's society about all the culture itself. It's very degrading. A lot of, they call it male patriarch that it gets involved. So that really opened up my eyes and realized that there is a deeper meaning with these Hmong communities and the culture and the tradition that it holds itself.
So I know you touched base on the misunderstanding pertaining to Hmong women. What about like the history that are missing or that is misunderstood from everyone pertaining to just history, the practice, and the culture traditions?
The history of the culture itself depends on who you are, how deep you want to dive into it. As the culture itself, it goes back many, many, many years, predates China. And when you start to learn about the history, it does get influenced by other nations. Some also includes like time area, centuries, and like I said, generations. It also deals with war. When somebody goes to war and they lose and they get taken over, they get influenced by the culture. In the history of Hmong, we always have histories about wars going back, predates China, and with genocide and all that happening to the Hmong people. It also happens to our history and our culture and practice and beliefs.
I know that especially with like the history, there's not much like physical books that actually like tell us about our history. Would you say that's something that's missing, or is it something that our people haven't really taken account to just write something down to present to us in the future to know what exactly happened? Or is this something that was missing throughout the whole history?
To answer that question, there are historians out there, are very limited to pertain on the history and documentations of the Hmong culture, the Hmong people itself. But in reality, like I said, throughout time, it's just a matter of which nation that really changes our beliefs and practices. To have a better understanding, these are passed down by stories or generations from your forefathers or foremothers. On top of that, there are some nations that do have accounts of the Hmong people being part of a practice or belief system that coexisted with other nations at that time. So to get down deep, you really have to ask, you really have to search not only in the Hmong community, but outside the Hmong community. And from there, you'll have pieces of histories that you could recollect. And as time goes and you have more information, the bigger picture gets presented in front of you.
So, who was the main person that you reached out to, or you took the time to learn more about the culture?
The person that I reached out to were some of my great influence, the mentors. I started out with my spiritual journey, and from there, I realized that everything's all interconnected and influenced by who you are, which is Hmong. So some of my biggest influencer would be my brother-in-law. I have the right settings growing up. My brother-in-law was a big member service to the Hmong community, especially with funerals and weddings. And just by being around him and observing what he does, I realized that the culture is really beautiful. Ideology, it does have practices that people can learn from it, but throughout time, some of these practices and beliefs are lost in the system. Some are corrupted and abused about it. So the mentors there, it's not because that they know it, it's because most likely they've been practicing for a long time.
So, you mentioned about with your brother in law reaching out to him and getting connected with the culture itself. And you also mentioned that you also help with weddings and funerals. What other things are you doing when it comes to connecting with others, when it comes to the culture itself? Like, are you helping just only for weddings and funerals, or are you doing other things?
Besides from the practice, just a quick reference to the historian. I'm always grateful enough to be part of a group called Dukatsu. This group here was established to more like scholars to learn about the history of the culture, tradition, and practices, and to preserve it. So going forward, now not only practices that I do get involved with, sometimes I do end up getting a little bit of education on the history and the culture itself to people who wants to pursue it or wants more understanding. And when they have questions, they're able to be a platform to answer some of the things that they have in questions or concerns.
Can you translate what the group means in English? That way, my non Hmong listeners know what that means.
So the group that I'm involved with, we're called Tu Ya Tzu. And it's not Tu as in boy. Tu means to be part of. And then Ja stands for roots. So it's to be part of the roots. Tzu means the knowledge or skills. So it's called Tu Ya Tzu. So we are part of a organizations that be part of the roots of the culture and practices of Hmong.
Is this group like everybody knows or have access to, or do you have to know someone who knows that group in order to get additional information or just learn about the culture?
If you do have an interest, if you could search us up, we are available to be some kind of mainstream or being popularized. We're just an organization, just for database. We don't really go out there and preach or tell people how to practice due to society that we're living. A lot of people have rights. They think what they think, they do what they want to do. We're just a group of people that when people are stumped or have questions or not sure about certain situation, they could reach out to us, most likely by membership. If they know us because they know somebody in the group, that's good. If you don't know anybody in that group, you're able to find us in social media and reach out to us, and we're glad to answer all your questions and concerns. Like I said, this group is not targeted to teach the community about culture, arts, history, and practices, but we do hold a lot of database on explaining why it is, what it is that we do, when do we do it, how do we do it. So That's what our group is all about. It's more for a support versus some kind of services, or like I said, we're just giving out information, we're collecting information. We don't do this as a business. We don't preach the practices. We're just a database that people can reach out if they don't understand how or certain things happen in the Hmong community or the culture itself.
Do you believe that by learning more about the culture itself, can it help preserve its tradition for future generations? And why not?
From my personal point of view, the answers to that question, there's really no right or wrong answer. The thing that influenced the most is that society changings and different generation coming into play. When you try to use that as a way of living, sometimes it's outdated. So the culture itself, you see a lot, you hear a lot about the community, how they want changes. And sometimes changes are good things, sometimes changes will be bad things. You have to understand what is good, what is bad. But as the people that do practice this, they do notice that within society and the culture itself, with the new generation here, it has to change. To be sustainable, we have to adapt to new changes, especially to new rules and regulations where your region subsides, where your community is. There is no wrong right way. I think the culture itself teaches you that when you're in the wrong path or when you have doubts, it kind of brings you back to say who we are. So when we think about who we are, we're talking about the heritage versus the culture itself. With the Hmong stuff, they're both heritage cultures. They do play a role. They go side by side. So to use it as or to preserve it as something that will always benefit to you, you have to understand why it is the way and how it changes throughout time and history and what has been adapted, what is new, what is old that comes along with the Hmong culture itself.
I mentioned earlier about like the histories and having books, right? In your opinion, how has the digital age, such as social media, online archives, how has it made it easier for anyone to have access to information about the culture? Do you think it's like difficult to get information about the culture, or do you think it's more of you have to talk to certain people in order to get that information? Because for me, it's hard for me to find history books about like back in the days how Hmong people started. So, in your opinion, do you think that social media or like online information is it more available to us to get the information about the Hmong culture?
So for that question, I do agree with you. The stuff that you find in social media, the stuff that you search in archive, the stuff that they have out there in historian books is very limited because the limitation there, like I said, we are a culture that goes back many, many years throughout time and history. We've been genocide, we've been manipulated to a point of the history itself. It's very broad. It's not specific to just Hmong lineage. So to have a better understanding with the limited stuff out there, you have to really seek out individual person that has some kind of history or some kind of experience with history that has come a long ways and passed down through verbal or storytelling. The misconcepts of that is like, how do you know it's accurate? As long as it's not on paper or documentation, they don't find it credible. Just by the word of their mouth, like I said, how do one understand and accept that that is part of information that is actual fact? As you go through person to person and you start talking to them, there's a pattern. They might have similar stories or similar information that are the same versus some that are different. Even though those are different, you don't really have to rule them out. You have to group them as okay, it's generalized into one big topic, even though it's not word for word or meaning for meaning, but it does fit in the generalization. And you can always confirm going back to archives and documentations or social media platforms to recollect that and to make sure that all the information do line up. That's the best way to go about besides going through documentations and social media platforms to research and learn about the history of the Hmong people, just due to the fact that it goes really deep in depth to have some kind of all-known database. I don't think that the information are all there. Some due to lost information, some due to restricted information. As you yourself or someone who's interested, not only you can go through all these documentations and archives, please be open-minded. Start asking your elders, see what they know about the history, and slowly you'll start to have a connection of who we are and why we are.
Don't you think that it's a lot better for those who have the knowledge that they should write a book about it or have some kind of like a hardcover, I don't know, like document or something to say that, okay, this is the culture of the Hmong, the history of the Hmong, we have it written down. That way, for future reference, people can look into it and know, okay, this is who we are and what we did and all that stuff. Like, don't you think that's a lot better if those people actually wrote a book about it?
I'm not gonna deny that there is none. There are certain individuals out there that do that. It's just not like community based yet. It's more of a personal reference.
Okay.
So if it has no connections to you, it wouldn't be of important matter to you. But what one can do, or one that the community should do or start doing, is that within the community, there's a lot of these clans, and you hear about a lot of these community clans that support and moral support out to the community, pertaining to like 18 council, and then it branches out to your own individual clan. If you were to get involved with those groups, reach out. Most groups that I know have some kind of cultural person that is in charge of their community. And when you start talking about cultural stuff within your own clan base versus more of a bigger community, you start to understand yourself first and knowing that the history and the heritage of yourself. Once you have that understanding, you could branch out to, okay, this is who I am. Now let's start searching out for, well, who are they? There's people out there that do write these down, do have collection, do have a history of your heritage, and you just have to start promoting or start acknowledging that things like this do exist. To have it come as a whole big one database, like I said before, we're in a community where everybody has their points of view. It is possible. It's not that we can't do it, we can do it. But the question is, how far or how big do we want to do it?
You mentioned about reaching out, right? So, what advice can you give to those who are interested to learn more about the culture, but they just don't know where to start? Even for me, I wouldn't know where to start. Like, do I just follow them on Facebook or do I have to know somebody to like, hey, learn more about the culture itself? Like, what advice can you give to someone who wants to learn about it, but then they don't know where to start?
My advice to you, if you want to start, have an interest in the Hmong culture itself. In today's society, I believe social media is the number one way to go. If not social media, do seek out within your own family. Start out small. Start out small, like going up to your dad or your uncles and just having a short conversation about who you are and why is it important that we need to know this culture. And within your family, they could start teaching you and explaining things. And for one to say, well, if I don't have any family that knows it, right?
Mhm.
Now, next thing you know is you reach out to your community. I'm pretty sure you go to weddings or like funerals and things that you have question about. You could just have a short conversation with certain individual and say, why do we do these things? And if they know it, they'll tell you. If they don't know it, they will point you in the right direction. To have the other thing, which like, well, do I have to know someone who practice, or do I really have to go to someone that really knows it, right? And like I said, our culture itself is very broad. Certain individual will know things, and when you ask them things, they can teach you all you want. But at the end of the day, you're still gonna find some loopholes. You're still gonna find some unanswered questions, and you're still gonna have to go to the next person. It doesn't really matter that you can call this individual. It depends. Just like we're in a new society and age these days, some of these people that you seek information and guidance, they might be of a business wise versus non-business. So you just have to really recollect about what is your goal? What is your purpose? A lot of these paid services, they're more for practices versus understanding the culture itself. In today's societies, practicing the culture it's irrelevant because a lot of things changes and time changes people change over time. If you want to go and just learn about the history and understanding of the culture itself, there are certain individuals out there that do teach them, but the recollection of all this information, it's not down to only one person knows it. It's many people that know certain histories and only parts. So to have more better knowledge or more understanding, you have to reach out and talk to more than just one individual.
With the knowledge that you've known about the culture itself, how has it helped you in the present time in your personal life? Have you grown from it? Have you learned to understand yourself not only as an individual but as like a male or someone who is not a benefit but just someone that could be helpful within the community or just like yourself? Like how has it changed you to become the person you are now in the present time?
Yeah, good question. The culture itself teaches me a lot of things. It taught me about compassion. The predate history of the culture versus what the culture is now. And there's a lot of things that changed and happen over time. A lot of things that change for the worse that are now considered as part of the culture or it's a adoption to the culture and practice. It taught me a lesson that not everybody understand or are on the same page. But when you really grasp the true culture itself, it teaches you to understand how to compromise it or how to deal with it, how to work around it. It does not segregate you from each other. It does not promote hatred. It's not supposed to have ill will towards each other. A lot of what I hear in society these days, it's very corrupted or it's very imbalanced to the point where a lot of people they don't want to disagree or agree to things that are happening in the community itself right now. It gives you compassion. It gives you a bigger insight to how to understand things. Once you have that compassion, then you really understand itself how do I react to things. A big question is since I know all this stuff, do I go out there, do I get upset or do I correct people if they're doing things that wasn't part of the culture or practice itself? It's all there just for your own understanding. You can teach them, you can educate them, but to force them to say, well, you need to do it the right way, you don't really have that authority. You can only be a role model to them. Practices that influence those types of situation, you learn how to be less ill towards it, more understanding, so you're more patient. You learn to understand, you learn to respect different people's opinion and how the way they think the culture should go versus the way you were learning taught itself. The culture itself, there's no universal. Basically, it's just a history of a guideline, and when people learn it, they can manipulate to the way they want it. As far as today's society, I believe the culture itself, heritage, and all that, it is to a point where it's been manipulated to one's personal game or personal belief. That's one big thing that learning or being part of understanding this Hmong culture and the heritage and all that has taught me to be more compassionate. And as I get more compassionate, I understand things more. I'm patient. I am very optimistic about things that happen within the Hmong community. And you're not really prone to really have some kind of judgmental towards certain individuals or the way they do things.
How would you use your knowledge of the culture for your future?
In the future, just your knowledge, you could understand how things goes. You start to realize that certain things part in the practice and the culture itself is not relevant. meaning there's no point of doing certain practices or certain ways that you could do it. You learn how to adapt, you learn how to change, you learn how to understand that by not doing these things or doing these things will make it more of a beneficial thing to do. You could also cut time, you could also cut cost that gets involved. So the history itself is just an understanding, and in the generation itself, the more I see it, it's more of a understanding versus practicing. People who are interested in knowing so that they could have the knowledge. But to go out there and practice, it does require a lot of time and effort, a lot of skills that you have to understand and do. So that is part of one thing that going to the future, I see a lot of people when they understand these Hmong culture and practices, they know how to probably simplify things, how to cut and change it, certain practices that will eliminate cost and time that gets involved.
Would you say that in the future, do you see yourself being more involved, or are you just going to continue doing what you are doing now?
There won't be a lot of these cultural practices just due to generation. When you study the histories and arts of the Hmong culture itself, it's just changes throughout generations. It gets influenced by the next generation. Like I said, things could happen. A lot of these practices or a lot of these culture stuff, sometimes they do get lost. People will not understand them more, or they will forget why we do these things. Going forward, this generation is a big influence of how in the future do we want to continue it. To me, a lot of these practices is being modified, is being changed. We live in a society now that it's all about monetary. With monetary, it's a big influence. It's gonna influence a lot of culture and beliefs, not just within the Hmong community, it changes throughout any other community. So as in the future goes, a lot of these practices you're gonna see is gonna go away. Unless certain individuals like myself do recognize that the compassion and love for the culture, it does change over generation. And as throughout time, you're gonna start thinking about, well, if anybody don't know these things, then who will know these things? And when you start asking about yourself, what can I do? Right? It starts with your family. As generation grows older, and you are the elder, you are going to be the next elder. You are going to be the next leadership. You are going to be the next role models that lead the way. And if you don't know it, your kids will not know it. And then suddenly the generation after that, it becomes very, very rare. Do I know it because I have to practice it? Not certainly. But do you know it that you understand, okay, this is what we used to do, and now this is how it changed. We don't do it no more because of X, Y, and Z. But if we were to done it, this is how we do it. This is why we do it, or when and where it gets involved. So that's where I'm going at, just because society changes and you have to adapt, or else you're gonna get lost.
You will say that you will just obtain the knowledge, and then let's say in the future, if people are curious, then you will just teach them about the culture itself then.
Most likely, that is what the end goal is. Even though knowing the culture, people still understand the culture, but practicing itself, it's a whole nother step that gets put into the meaning of knowing the culture. There's a difference between knowing the culture versus practicing the culture. The difference is that it's very broad. So just because you know the culture doesn't mean it has to go that way, because different culture, they get influenced by different nations and different regions. What you know in this culture, if you go to the Hmong people of Vietnamese, they have a whole different set of culture and practice. So is it universal? Not really. But is it achievable? It can be, but it's based on your influence and how the way society changes people.
Thank you, Han, for your information and knowledge of the Hmong culture, and on top of that, sharing with us your experiences and opinions on it. That covers everything I wanted to ask you, But before we wrap up this conversation, is there anything else you'd like to add or share that we didn't touch on?
One thing I like to add about is I keep talking about the generations. The $1 million question is the generation. To ask yourself within the next generation, if I'm not interested in these, or when my kids will still have the opportunity. That's one thing that you really have to think about. In this generation, if you believe that there changes a lot about the culture and history, and you feel like there's not enough information out there, there's not enough influence for me to learn these things. A lot of these things do involve with your personal belief, your personal practices. A lot of people will say, well, I know it, but I just don't want to do it. And then next generation comes, where how are you influence the next generation? And I want to open this to the listeners that if not you today, we are the next generation. If we're not able to know these things or practice these things, come to your kids, the next generation, how are they going to learn things? So you just have to be really optimistic. If I don't know these things, you have to understand, well, most likely my next generations, they're not going to know these things. And sometimes when you do feel like that, kind of encourage you to say, well, that's why I need to go learn these things. I need to take lead. I need to go get information so that I could at least tell the next generation or be the next leadership that do practice these things.
Okay. So I know that we mentioned about reaching out to other people, right? Is it okay if my listeners reach out to you to talk to you about the culture or just anything involving the culture itself? Can they contact you?
Certainly, they can reach out to me. I will put down my email. I will link the group I am in. I know these things because of great masters or mentors that I get involved with. So even though if I can't answer your questions or have clueless about your concerns and stuff, I still have mentors that could still give advice. This is why I have mentors and masters that teaches me these things. And if you have a deeper or harder understanding about the culture, then certainly you can reach out to them too.
All right, Han, that is it. That is all that I have for you. And again, thank you so much for being a part of my episode and for having these conversations about the Hmong culture. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, that is it for this episode. Although we only scratched the surface level about the Hmong culture and Han's life experiences, I do want to let you guys know that I will definitely have him come back for future episodes because I would love for us to talk more about the misconceptions of the Hmong culture, the roles of a Hmong man, his spiritual journey, and maybe I might have his master be part of an episode. Who knows? But if you have listened to the very end of this episode and you find Han's experiences and knowledge of the Hmong culture to be interesting and very intriguing, I'll definitely have him back for future episodes. If you are also interested in reaching out to him, you can email him at vang.leem85@gmail.com. I'll spell that out for you. That's vang.leem85@gmail.com. I will also have his email and the group that he is a part of available in my description box or my post so that you can contact him if you have any follow-up questions to ask him. Other than that, that is it. And again, for those who are interested in being a guest or just being a part of my podcast, definitely reach out to me. I don't bite. I'm not that scary lady, okay? I am welcome to have any conversations about anything, everything about life. If you want to put yourself out there and talk about your life experiences with me, definitely hit me up so that we can set up a date, a time, do a little recording session, and I will definitely have an episode available for all my listeners to listen to get to know you and just to get to know about life in general. But that is all that I have. I'm gonna end it before I blabber some random nonsense. But other than that, I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.